Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here. Now let's answer 3 big questions for this. First, is it worth it, this signature Lightcone for Jiaoqiu, those many springs? Of course, it's going to be best in slot, is their signature Lightcone. The second question that we want to answer is, how versatile is this? If we have a limited amount of resources, we want to know when we are pulling signatures, what exactly we are getting out of it, who else can use it, will it scale well with time? And last but not least, for those of us who just simply do not have the amount of resources, we decided to skip this. I want to suggest some alternatives that you can use for this Lightcone if you want to get similar kind of benefit or utility as this Lightcone. Now let's go first start off with this Lightcone. You know we don't waste any time on this channel, so I like to just dive right in. I think that this Lightcone is a very, very good Lightcone, especially if you want to turn your nihility characters into supportive characters for maybe Akirion, and in future if they want to play a nihility sub DPS with a bit of supportive role to increase the damage. This wall of text here, first line easy, 60% effect hit rate increase. The wall of text over here is basically when you use your basic attack skill ultimate, you get a 10% damage debuff that is applied on the enemy. So hit them, enemy gets debuff, 10% damage increase lasting for 2 turns. If the wearer that you are using, it inflicts a DOT, so for example, Jiaoqiu inflicts that burn ashen rolls on the enemy, there's a 60% base chance, then upgrading this debuff from 10%, now it becomes 24% damage increase the enemy takes. This is on top of Jiaoqiu's original kit, which already lets him debuff the enemies, amplifying a lot of damage. So you get a lot of multiplicative damage increases on the enemy, which is very, very fantastic as well. 24% damage increase. The only downside I think is the 60% base chance, which is why I think they supplied it with 60% effect hit rate. This 60% effect hit rate also helps him hit his skills better, but at the same time, base chance is multiplied by your overall effect hit rate to give you your final applied chance. So you might miss 1 or 2, but every 2 turns, you can it lasts for 2 turns, so it's quite a long time in general. So now that we talked about this, who else can use this Lightcone? Let's jump into the game engine to talk about it before we finish the last 2 questions out as well. Okay, so on this screen here, we have some characters, and I think the ones that use this Lightcone better will be supportive characters or sub DPS in nature. Those that come to mind is basically almost like any single character, except maybe Akirion doesn't really care too much about it. There are better Lightcones available for damage dealing units. I don't think it's a very, very good damage dealer, but let's first things first talk about some units. I think Quek, who is a 4-star version of Jiaoqiu, definitely can use it very well. You can see I already have another Lightcone that looks similar to it. Quek is a character that can use very well. She burns the enemies with her abilities, which means that you can proc the 24%. She doesn't mind the effect hit rate also to land her debuffs properly. I think she's very, very good with that Lightcone. That base attack higher, which means of 582 if I'm not wrong. 582 means that you are already much higher than a lot of the other 4 stars, very becoming of a 5-star damage dealer. For example, Jiaoqiu, or maybe you want your 4 stars to do a little bit more damage. The 5-star stats does make quite a big difference as well. So Quek can probably use it quite well. Sampo can also use it quite well. He procs DOT, he also inflicts a lot of damage on the enemies, doesn't mind 5-star Lightcone stats, and more damage increase means your main DPS can do a lot. His overall ability ultimate also increases damage, so Sampo can use it very nicely. Even a character, for example, like Kafka, where's my Kafka? Kafka can also use it quite well. If you don't have a signature Lightcone that procs this additional erode and shock, you can also find good use for it. You get decent amount of attack. Instead of proccing erode on the enemy, which deals lightning DOT, you are able to inflict a debuff which increases the amount of damage the enemy takes, turning her into a pseudo DPS or pseudo support for your main DPS in that sense. Characters, for example, like Black Swan, if you want to turn her into more supportive role, can consider using it as well. She puts wind shear on the enemy as well. She defense shreds the enemy. So with Black Swan, you have defense shred, you have damage buffing. As you can see, it's pretty versatile. And most nihility characters do have some sort of debuffing related in their overall kit and DOT relating into their overall kit, so they can make use of it quite well. The question mark characters, when you want to put it on them, will be characters, for example, like Welt, Silverwolf, as well as Luca. Luca is more single target in nature, so you don't get the AoE debuff as quickly. You might as well run other gear, for example, like Resolution Shines or Pearls of Sweat to defense shred the enemy much more to get more utility out of it. Whereas for Welt, you don't proc the full benefit because he has no DOT, so Resolution Shines or Pearls of Sweat might be a little bit better. Silverwolf, same thing, you don't proc too much DOT on her as well, so I don't think it's very good for only these 3 characters, and of course Akirion herself and Pella too. You can find good value in this other Lightcone over here, Resolution Shines, Pearls of Sweat. Now then that comes to the question is, when is Resolution Shines or Pearls of Sweat actually sufficient, and when is the signature Lightcone actually better? And that's when we interlude into the final part. If you do not have that at all, some people will be looking at this because this gives you a 16% damage increase at Super Imposition 5. I believe it's like 8 or 12%. We'll check it out later in a little bit at Super Imposition 1. But for Jiaoqiu havers, you are thinking of other Lightcones to have. This is something that you might be looking towards because you increase damage on the enemy, you ensnare them, which means you inflict a debuff on them. The difference between a defense shredding and damage increase is defense shredding, technically you will have diminishing returns, especially if your character has defense ignore. Any character has defense ignore or you already have a lot of defense shred in your roster, defense shredding matters a little bit less because the lesser of the enemy's defense you have, the diminishing returns that you get also, there's only so much defense that you can shred. Whereas damage increase, the sky is the ceiling, so that's the key difference. Why defense shredding is better for certain characters? Of course, this 16% is very huge if you have it at S5 compared to only the 10% if you're using it on characters like Pella, who's only able to proc the 10% because she doesn't have, for example, an ability to maybe apply TOT and stuff like that. So mathematically, the numbers add up. This is definitely a lot better for her, cheaper alternative too. But what about the other Lightcones that we have? And for that, I want to go into the Lightcone data bank here, into all the nitty Lightcones. And if you're finding value in this video so far, do give me a like and subscribe for more of such future content. I try to do this for every single limited Lightcone so that we can help plan our schedule. As we know, limited Lightcones actually are quite important in Honkai style, but you can't pick up everything. But anyways, I wasted enough time. Let's talk about the last section here, which is which other Lightcone I think is competitive to that Lightcone for a character like Jiaoqiu. If you are looking for the supportive role of increasing your main DPS damage, Resolution Shines or Pearls of Sweat is very nice. You get a 12% defense decrease on the enemy, which is already like, versus if you talk about the other Lightcone, his signature is like 10%. And it goes up to 24%. So you do get quite a lot of value out of this, especially since you're able to proc Akirion's, if you inflict debuff on the enemy or whatever not. This is already very competitive for any of you who are thinking to scale with your account and stuff like that. You get higher base attack for the signature, but this is also pretty decent. So in terms of scalability, I think he has quite close competition with Resolution Shines or Pearls of Sweat. Other than that, something that gives you both effect hit rate as well as a debuff, very few of them actually do that. If you look at this, you have increased hit rate here from Eyes of Prey, 40%, increased DOT by 48%, but it's only on the wearer, it's not a supportive role. So if you are looking for something that increases his effect hit rate by a lot, you will find it quite tough to find the right one. So this one doesn't give you team-wide support, doesn't inflict additional debuffs on the enemy. If you're trying to like build stacks for doctor ratio and stuff like that, more debuffs and whatnot, you don't get that. This is an event Lightcone over here that we got in the past before tutorial mission starts. 40% effect hit rate, again, defense reduce enemies, get some energy back. This is event limited, so if you don't have that, you won't be able to choose that. Solitary healing is another one, which this is the free-to-play one, but unfortunately it doesn't give you any effect hit rate at all. Is this useful for Jiaoqiu? It's okay, because when you use your ult, increases DOT by wearer by 48%, which is quite nice, but it's very, very selfish for Jiaoqiu himself. But whereas you are trying to look for something that supports the team a bit more, which is his overall playstyle, you want to inflict debuffs on the enemy, you want to, for example, keep up time on your skills. The good thing about this is you get this when a target suffering from DOT by wearer is defeated, you generate some energy for wearer. This is, I think, the best part about this. It gives them some energy refund from solitary healing, other than like some sort of break effect here and there. Other than that, not too much. I think the rest of them are very, very selfish. If you're building him for more of a DPS, some of you maybe are geared towards that way, then you have a lot more options. You can just go like the signature DPS Lightcones like Good Night Sleep Well as a 4-star equivalent. But I think he wants to really be played as a supportive character to buff Akirion and other main DPS. I think my favorite choice will be Resolution Shines or Pearls of Sweat, just to apply that additional defense threat if you're not pulling for his signature. If you are looking for In the Name of the World, this is of course a little bit selfish as well. It gives him a bit of effect hit rate only in his skill. and increases his damage done. So a little bit more selfish, but good stats. So you get a little bit more damage from him. You don't get the utility. I think that in the name of war is a good in between both of them. Like you can do some damage more of himself. If you have it, might as well just use it. Otherwise, I think a supportive one, Resolution Shines or Pearls of Sweat, is much better. And with the Lightcone skill in the long run, I think he's a very versatile Lightcone, worth having. But as a free-to-play player, and here's my honest bias thoughts, I don't think it's worth it to pull for it, because it's only just a couple of damage percent increase more. 24% is not going to make or break it. If it's going to make or break it for your account, you likely have other things to focus on first, rather than spending like 80 pulls for a thing. I think if you have this one lying around, Resolution Shines or Pearls of Sweat, consider using it. I think it's good enough for most people. And that's my honest thoughts. If you appreciate my content, do like and subscribe for more such future content. And check out these two other videos, which I think you might be interested in as well. And see you in the next video.